Hello, and we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Monday's edition of the This Is Not Therapy Hour, brought to you by Effective Artistry. My name is Marie. I'm an executive functioning coach with Effective Artistry, and I'm joined as ever by Brandon Tessers, LCPC, and clinical director of Effective Artistry, and by Caitlin Miller, LPC, therapist at the Effective Artistry practice based in Northbrook, Illinois. Effective Artistry is a neurodiversity affirming therapy practice based in the state of Illinois, available for therapy anywhere within the state of Illinois. And there are a couple of executive functioning coaches like myself who can work with you anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. So the This Is Not Therapy Hour is not therapy, as the title suggests. It's an open conversation. It's a chance for you to have a chat with Brandon and Caitlin. And I'll keep an eye on the time. I'll keep an eye on any questions or comments in the chat and direct them to Brandon and Caitlin. So you can ask questions about neurodiversity, about mental health, about therapy, anything that's on your mind. And we'll go wherever the conversation takes us. We usually have a topic prepared in advance, but I don't have a topic this week, guys. So if you have, we'll roll with whatever you want to talk about. But if you're in the chat, you take priority. So anything you want to ask us, we'll answer if we can. So hello. After that big introduction, hello, Brandon. Hello, Caitlin. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
How
I'll go anywhere.
I was gonna make a joke about, oh, it's nice weather. Like
It is nice weather. Look, I make fun of myself a lot because it's a nice way to point out something I'm actually self-conscious about, So I'll make fun of myself and say that talking to me is very draining for people, even though it's also very helpful for people because, you make a comment like the nice weather and I say, okay, we can spend a whole hour talking about the weather and how changes in the weather impact how people are feeling and what they're doing and the biological implications as well, and so it's just everything connects to everything.
Yeah.
I don't think you actually want to talk about the weather.
I actually, that's because I remember, I think it was like 6 months ago, you said something like, I'm thinking about the intersection between mood and barometric pressure because a lot of people talk about weather. They don't talk about barometric pressure. And then I don't think I ever heard what you decided. Did you determine something?
Well, it's not that I determined something so much as I was made aware of something and then started thinking about the potential implications of it. So the thing I was made aware of is that, like how there's that stereotype of someone saying like, oh, my joints are aching, that means it's going to rain, is because the pressure in the air, the environmental pressure in the air, the greater it is, the more it's pushing in on your tissues. So any tissues which are inflamed are compressed more when the air pressure is higher. And when the pressure gets lower, the inflamed tissue, starts to expand and press on other things. Well, that happens with nerve tissue as well. Like the brain in particular, that your brain is physically, and it's a different, it's, I don't know all the technical details because obviously there's, fluid that the brain is surrounded by and whatever. But from what I am given to understand that yes, the especially if you're dealing with like brain inflammation, that when the pressure is lower, that the brain can expand, and that when that happens, it causes all kinds of things.
Yeah, and would that include like migraines and headaches as well as exacerbation of arthritis?
Yes, it could include those things. It could also include things like senses of despair that come out of nowhere. Those are often in connection with migraines as well. Like those are sometimes considered like prodromal, which from what I understand means prior, a sign of an oncoming migraine. That like if all of a sudden out of nowhere you're getting this sense of dread, not connected to anything, that can potentially be related to an oncoming migraine, which can be related to that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. I think I'm much more of a hippie than you are with like the mind body stuff.
I don't know what do you mean by that?
Like give me some good curcumin supplements and it'll save me from everything.
Wait, so you mean you think you like supplements more than I do?
I think, actually, I'm already refuting my argument. Never mind.
I'm not arguing. I'm asking you.
No, I thought of my response, but it was silly. My simple response is yes.
Do you want to talk about supplements?
No. But I think the thing I would want to
I'm
talk
not as
about
skeptical
more.
of them as you think. It seems.
I guess the thing that I think would be worth talking about is the mind-body connection, and I think where that usually goes is like taking care of our bodies helps us to take care of our minds.
Talking about this.
Why?
Yeah.
Why do I like talking about this? Because it's particularly relevant to neurodivergent people who.
Oh, I didn't perceive that. I just asked you that question.
Oh, you said. Maybe I misheard. I thought you said I would like to talk about the mind-body stuff in terms of like how taking care of our bodies impacts our minds. And
Yeah. Okay, you got it right.
Oh. Yeah. No, I do like talking about that stuff, and I do think it's particularly relevant to neurodivergent people.
Can I ask if you could turn your mics up a little bit, if that's at all possible? You're a little bit low. While you're doing that, I'll just read out a couple of comments we have. Hi, Brandon's dad, who says bariatric chambers for everyone. Scratch that. Drugs for everyone.
Oh, that's so funny.
I mean, the second is a lot more feasible than the first.
Yeah.
That just solved all the world's problems in one comment.
Yep. He's probably the first person to ever think that drugs might help people make people feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Dad. Do you hear us better now? I moved the mic closer to us.
A little bit, yeah. It's a little bit low for some reason.
I don't know what that could be. It is this mic, right?
Yeah.
I don't see a way to like adjust how much. Oh, automatically adjust mic volume. There we go. Is that better?
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay, we'll try that then. Figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
That's a source of great consternation between the two of us, is that I like to figure things out on the fly and you not as much.
Yeah, I'd rather prepare a topic a week before and have like quotes set up and be like, well, this philosopher said this, and so that's why I blah, blah, blah. So this is a really good challenge for me.
Yeah, I would hate doing that.
I think Marie likes topics too, so now you're technically outnumbered.
No,
I do. I like to be a little bit prepared, but when a topic comes up like this that I'm interested, I'm like, go.
I just don't like preparing for them.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, well, that's how it's set up, right? You guys usually choose a topic and then I just show up. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
What
are we talking about? Mind body stuff?
Mind body.
Yeah, as it relates to neurodivergent people in particular are more affected by it, ...
Would it feel like I'm putting you on the spot if I asked you to describe what you mean by the mind-body connection?
The way our physical body influences our mental health.
Okay. Because people mean a lot of different things by that phrase, and it depends on context. But so here's a fun, fancy, like technical philosophical term: supervene. If A supervenes on B, it means that any change in A must have been accompanied by a change in B. It doesn't establish a cause and effect relationship, but it does say that for A to have changed, B must also have changed. So the conscious mind supervenes on the physical body. We don't know exactly what in the world consciousness is. I personally am a believer in what's called the hard problem of consciousness, which is that it's not even theoretically possible to be able to say exactly what consciousness is in empirical terms, like what processes it is composed of. Some people would disagree. It mostly doesn't matter. But we do know from lived experience that changes in the physical condition impact the cognitive, the conscious state.
I think within the context of therapy, people usually mention the mind-body connection as, is there something happening in my body that is unknowingly affecting my mental health, and can I change
Yes.
that in my body to then positively affect my mental health?
Yes. The answer to that is always yes, in theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that another way that the mind-body connection often gets brought up is when it's cycling on itself, that something in the body causes something in the mind, which then causes something in the body, which causes something in the mind, and it kind of...
Would irritable bowel syndrome be an example of that?
Potentially. Irritable bowel syndrome is much like, chronic fatigue syndrome and things like that. It's a syndrome. We've talked a lot about the difference between disease and disorder. A syndrome is separate from either of those. Syndrome means that there's a collection of symptoms that happen in correlation with each other at a certain rate. So it's useful to lump those things together, but there is no pathophysiology that's been determined. So chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, etc. Even Down syndrome, where we do have, like, in Down syndrome, there are biomarkers. Most syndromes involve biomarkers, something we can observe, but we don't know exactly why the thing that we can observe causes the symptomatic experience. So yes, irritable bowel syndrome. That also gets into the gut-brain axis, which I think is very fascinating and relatively new.
Aren't there more neurons in our guts than the amount of neurons a dog's brain has or something? I feel like I heard that on a podcast yesterday.
That could be true. I don't know. What I am aware of, so the gut-brain axis is something that, to my knowledge, only really started getting paid attention to like 10 years ago or so. It's relatively recent. Is just that there are nerve endings in our guts, our bowels, like that connect to other parts of the nervous system in ways that we didn't realize before. And that, like, for example, this could mean a lot of things. That's why people are studying it so much. But for example, you have different kinds of bacteria that can live in there, and different kinds of bacteria, A, eat different types of chemicals as their food, and B, produce different types of waste chemicals after processing their fuel source. And that the chemicals that are released by that then trigger certain signals in those nerve endings, which go elsewhere and trigger other things, and yada, yada, yada. It seems to be this is kind of something people have always known, but the science is backing it up more and more. It seems that what's going on in your gut is very, very impactful in your cognitive state, especially so far. This has been a big focus of the research, especially in terms of the activation of the fight or flight response and deactivation, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. I feel like I'm talking in a bunch of jargon.
I think I'm following. Marie, do you have a...
Yeah, this is really interesting because I was reading about this just today online in terms of ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, that some studies have shown that there are variations in certain populations of gut bacteria in ME patients compared to the general population. So my question then, I didn't read the full paper, so I don't know if they address this, is does the fact that you're limited by your illness and your diet may change because you're limited by your illness affect the gut microbiome, or is there something going on in the gut microbiome that is causing the illness? So,
or both, or neither.
Or both, yeah.
That's, when people say correlation is not causation, it doesn't just mean that you shouldn't treat a correlation as though it's a causation. You need more evidence in order to consider it causation. It means in the strictest sense that we can never say what exactly in practical terms, we can say this causes this, but we can never actually there's never a way to actually control all the variables and isolate everything down to one thing, which mostly is being very nitpicky. But when it comes to like consciousness and behavior, especially, those things are way too complicated to consider anything to be a cause.
Well, then doesn't it kind of become, okay, you have chronic fatigue syndrome and you also identify as being autistic, so what things treat chronic fatigue syndrome and what things could we do to accommodate improving your experience as a neurodiverse person in the world? And then maybe they kind of like dance with each other and things can improve.
Yeah, well, that's the utility of all of these things, right? Is to say you have this set of experiences in common with other people, in to some extent, and other people have found these things to be helpful. So it's worth exploring and trying those things yourself. That's why it's useful to call it autism or chronic fatigue syndrome or whatever else, as opposed to just saying like, oh, you're you, which is true, but it's not helpful in being able to draw on other people's experiences.
I know definitely with my clients who identify as autistic, and particularly femme and non-binary people, there's a lot of like, my body's always in pain, or various forms of that, and sometimes that turns into something like chronic fatigue syndrome or other like kind of major physical illnesses. So I don't know if I feel like that kind of relates to what Marie is saying and is a little bit less jargony.
Yeah, and there's a lot I think that is practically useful to explore there.
Yeah.
Because I think certainly anecdotally, there's truth to that pattern. You and I and others have noticed it.
Yeah.
I don't know about any like large scale research that might exist.
I'm not sure about that either. I'm guessing it doesn't exist.
The way I find it useful to talk about this stuff is attention and awareness are both finite. They're limited. You can only notice so much. And once something has entered into your awareness, and it's staying there, you can only be aware of so much at a time. Which means that anything that you notice takes up some resource that is not available to be spent on something else. And same with anything that you're aware of. So a lot of this work starts with that. It's what are the processes that dictate what do you notice and what don't you? And we can make up any categories, right? Because we could say like everything in the world is either this plant or not this plant, like two categories. But one very useful is mind and body. That mind is the conscious experience, body is the physical experience. And anything that you are aware of or paying attention to that is a conscious thing means that that resource is not being spent on anything physical, and vice versa.
And something I've noticed that's helpful about that delineation is that I think it can help people a lot when they're in like fight or flight, or they're panicked, or they're ruminating, or various forms of like using most of their attentional awareness on their conscious experience, and then being able to shift that into the body. And that's a way that people can kind of find some level of relief. Yeah,
I call that stimming. And there's a bunch of different versions of it, mindfulness and meditation and yoga, like a lot of breathing. There are a lot of different things from a lot of different practices that whatever specific thing is true all ends up that this part is also true, at least. That it draws attention to the physical, your body and the surrounding physical environment, which means that attention must be pulled, awareness must be pulled away from what's in your head.
So were you going to I guess this is just me predicting, but were you going to the point of non-binary femme people who are autistic disproportionately focus on their mind, and then their body just kind of like takes a toll over time?
Autistic people disproportionately pay attention to and are aware of things that exist in the cognitive experience. I think that's a large part of what it means to be autistic. It's certainly not the only thing, but like autism, we even call it that because AUT, like the same root in like autobiography, it means self. Autism means a person who is by themselves, meaning like in their own head, paying attention to their own experience and not that of others. And that can be expressed in a lot of different ways. And I think that is also relevant to why there's an increase in diagnosis and blah, blah, blah. There's just so much fascinating stuff to talk about. But yeah.
We have a couple of comments in the chat. If I can
Thank you.
One here says, listening, I'm thinking that drugs mitigate the mind-body connection. But is a distracted mind or body what we really want? Embracing and experiencing the good and bad, I'm thinking, allows for more growth versus moments lost to distractions.
Okay. Couple things. One, I'm always curious when someone calls something a distraction, because that's not how attention works. That when you're calling something a distraction, what you're saying is, I am not paying attention to something else that I think I should be paying attention to. Like even the word again, etymologically, TRAC, that root, same as tractor or attract, or it means to pull. So something is pulling your attention, but you are cognitively identifying it as being not what you should be paying attention to, and therefore you call it a distraction, meaning it's pulling you away from something else. You're centering something that you're not paying attention to. So the immediate question always is, what is it that you think you should be paying attention to, and why do you think that it should be that you're paying attention to that instead of the thing that you are paying attention to?
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons. I'm not saying that you should never think that, but I'm saying it's worth exploring that. Number two, different drugs affect people in different ways. So we could not loop all drugs in together in any way about it being a distraction or whatever.
Yeah.
But certainly any drug which is psychoactive, theoretically at least, must mess with the mind-body connection in some way because it's changing your awareness, which changes how you're aware of everything. I myself have only really done one drug. Well, I guess it depends on what you qualify as a drug. But I have not done, the only thing that would even remotely be considered an illicit drug I've ever done is marijuana. So I can talk about that a bit. But other than that, I couldn't say other than to just talk about people's report of their experience.
Was part of the person's comment implying that, like, if you pay attention more to the things that you're distracted from, then it will do you some good? I guess that's what I was kind of reading in it. I don't know.
More that embracing the good and bad.
So
do we want to be like it? I think it's a distracted mind or body what we really want. So I think it's more about going with the flow.
Well, so the question would be, what is it that you're saying you should be paying attention to that you theoretically aren't if you're distracted? What is it that you think you're missing that you shouldn't be, or that you would benefit from paying attention to? Be aware of what you're centering, meaning you're measuring or describing something based on the absence or presence of whatever you're centering. So if you ask me how I am and I say bad or not bad, I'm centering the bad. Because I could instead say not good and good, respectively. But which thing we're paying attention to matters. And embracing the good and bad is a great life philosophy, I think. But it doesn't hold up to close scrutiny.
Yeah.
What do we mean by good? What do we mean by bad? As an approach to life, to just say, hey, stuff happens, like it's life, deal with it how you've got to deal with it, great. But it doesn't give anybody really any like specific actionable things.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Things don't always have to be actionable. Just.
Yeah. Was there another comment, Marie?
There was, yeah. And this is one that resonates with me, actually. How strongly would you prioritize things like exercise and eating well in a mental health journey? I know running and eating will help me, but the amount of effort it takes to implement those changes permanently is immense. I often just want to put it aside as something I can't handle addressing right now.
So this goes back to your question and something you and I were talking about before the stream.
Yes.
A lot of this has to do with, here's my way into this. If I ask you how much water are you supposed to drink in a day, how much should we drink in a day? Most people will say something like 8 glasses of water, 8-ounce glasses of water, which makes sense because that comes from research. Nobody knows that research was done by Gatorade, basically, because it was at the Hydration Institute, which is Gatorade's research arm. I think it's actually Coca-Cola or something that owns Gatorade, but because
it's
of course,
just one person who owns every company.
Who would be incentivized to say, hey, you should drink even when you're not thirsty, other than somebody selling water? Why would anybody else even bother trying to?
That just makes me believe in humanity a little bit less, Brandon.
It should make you believe in research a little bit less.
Yeah. I kind of already don't.
I know. But that's why I'm starting us off here for the people. It's not to not believe in it, it's to be aware of what it is. Because logically, obviously, I weigh 235 pounds. Should I be drinking the same amount of water every day as my wife, who weighs significantly less than I do? That doesn't make sense. Should I drink the same amount of water in one day where I'm it's the middle of winter and I'm inside and just sitting around and reading as another day where I'm walking through the desert and sweating buckets? Of course not. That's not how this works.
And Marie drinks some water.
Yeah.
So this,
I'm like 5'3" and a bit, but I have only one kidney, so I drink buckets of water. But somebody else my height wouldn't drink as much as I drink. It's all relative, right?
Right. The research isn't meant to be a prescription. It's not meant to say this is what you should do. What it is they're looking at how much water a bunch of people drink over a certain amount of time while performing certain tasks or being measured in certain ways. And then they statistically work out the average of what they would consider to be the optimal outcomes tends to be when people are, but nobody's actually drinking 8-ounce glasses of water. Nobody's actually sleeping exactly 8 hours every night. Even if you sleep about 8 hours, it's not exactly 8. That's statistical analysis. And obviously there are so many variables that weigh into how much you should drink or not. How much sugar have you eaten and when did you last eat? Would vary. Like how much have you been using the bathroom or not? Are you going to be on a long drive where you don't want to have to use the bathroom? Like, so the good news is that you do have a system that is built to measure the specific variables unique to you individually, moment to moment, in order to give you a readout on whether or not you should drink. And we call it thirst. That's what the experience of thirst is your body and brain. The brain is part of the body, paying attention to all of the internal state and saying, oh, we're thirsty. Now, the thing that gets all messed up is thirst is under what we would call interoception. There's like different senses. Interoception, there are way more than just the 5 senses, in case anybody is not. Those are the big 5. They're the easiest to notice, and they have the most to do with observing the external world. But you have senses inside your body, right? And you're not seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, or smelling those things. So there are nerve endings on your bladder. There are nerve endings on your stomach that sense the physical, mechanical pressure of how full or empty they are. And then those things get processed through perception and talk, like we feel it as an urge to urinate or eat or whatever.
Back to the comment.
So what I try to focus on with neurodivergent people especially is, I call it deprioritized interoception. We do not pay as much attention, generally speaking, to the signals that are coming from our physical body. Tiredness, hunger, fullness on the other side. Honestly, one that nobody ever talks about, the need to defecate, which is hugely impactful on people will say, oh, I'm hungry and therefore I'm irritable. I've never heard anyone say, oh, I really need to poop and I'm irritable because of it, even though it does impact that. The need to drink, etc. The way that we're built is that we're supposed to be aware of and responsive to these signals as they're happening. But for various reasons, our attention has shifted more into the cognitive environment and therefore away from the physical environment, and we notice this stuff less. So that means a couple of things. Number one, it means your experience of your physical body is going to become overall much more negative. Because by the time that you do notice, by the time that a signal has reached a threshold where you do pay attention, it's much worse. I never say like, oh, I'm a little peckish. I'm either not thinking about food or I'm like, oh my God, I need to eat right now. I'm shaky. I either don't think about whether I need to use the bathroom or I'm running down the hall.
Yeah.
Now.
Sorry, another funny comment. Following up on drugs for everyone, diapers for everyone.
Wait, what?
Diapers for everyone.
Diapers for everyone.
I don't know this, but I feel like wearing a diaper would be so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think your dad is the new diaper salesman now.
Sell anything to anyone. He's a great salesman. You wonder where I get it from.
Yeah.
So there are different things to do in response to that. One is to just deal with it, that like your experience of your body is overwhelmingly negative. And the metaphor I was using with you earlier of if you have a room in your house that you haven't gone in 5 years, then when you go open the door, it's going to be it's going to be a mess in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to want to shut the door again and be like, nope, never mind. That was not helpful to look in there.
Yeah.
But if there's something you need in it, then you kind of got to open the door, deal with the fact that it's a mess because you haven't been paying attention to it, and work through all that. So as you start to pay more attention to your body, it will feel worse because you haven't been taking care of it. It's not always true. It might just be that it happened to work out, that when you start paying attention, it happens to have been in good shape this whole time, but it's not likely if you haven't been aware of it, you haven't been. Now, the other workaround is routine. That rather than drinking when I'm thirsty, I just drink a certain amount of water at a certain time so that I never get thirsty. I eat a certain amount that's where the research comes in. As opposed to doing the work of becoming more aware of your body moment to moment, you can instead say, I think that the way that I'm feeling, which is cognitive because I'm focused on my conscious experience, I think the way I'm feeling, which is unpleasant and I want to change, might have to do with some stuff that my body is dealing with that I'm not noticing, which is a good theory. And then instead of learning how to pay attention to it, I'm just going to go look at the research that says, what should I do? And then try and build myself a routine. And
so are you implying that neurodivergent people can benefit from routine in that way?
Yeah, everybody benefits from routine. And
would you say they disproportionately benefit from routine more than?
I would say we are disproportionately aware of the extent to which we benefit from routine or don't. A lot of people benefit, all of us benefit from routines that we don't even think of as routines because they're not a thing we consciously constructed or have to remind ourselves to do.
Yeah.
It's just how it works, Most of your life is routine. Routine would mean like a thing that you do without consideration, without variation.
Because I think I should be able to read the comments because my brain isn't good at remembering these things. But I feel like part of the comment was essentially saying, like, how can I do these things more often that I know benefit my body?
Yeah.
Yes. So
I think that it's the amount of effort it takes to implement those challenges permanently is immense. And permanently is a big word, I think.
Yes. And that's the comment earlier was getting us toward there. And this is just my long way of getting there because I have to explain every step. That part of the reason it is so difficult to make these changes is because you're making them, you're very aware of the cost that you're paying, where the value that you get out of it is theoretical.
Yeah.
Because the whole problem is that you're not paying attention to how you feel. So any improvement in how you feel is not something that you're really noticing. You notice the difficulty, the cost. You don't notice the value, even if you believe that it exists. Or if you do notice a value in terms of like your conscious experience is more enjoyable, you're still theoretically connecting that to the thing you did.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're trying to paint and you move your hand and you see the line, that's a pretty easy thing to be, oh, if I want another line, I move my hand again. If you're trying to paint and I say, jump up and down and then the line will appear, even if that works, you jump up and down and the line will appear, it's still going to be a lot harder for you to get yourself to jump up and down and to notice the specific variations and how doing it affects what comes out.
So are you saying as people become more aware of the benefit of exercise in their bodies, that they will be more incentivized to continue it because the value will be obvious versus the value is theoretical, and so then I'm less incentivized to continue and make something a habit?
Yes, and not just incentive, although that is part of it, but also being able to look at the practical cause and effect relationship.
Yeah.
It's like all learning. The more the less time and space exists between the effort and the outcome, the more easily we start to connect it. And talking about
I was just going to ask how neurodivergent perception of time, if such a thing exists, can affect our ability to maintain habits and routine.
Yes.
I think that's a huge thing.
It is a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's another thing I would lump into one of those things where neurodivergent people are more aware of the issue, not necessarily that they have the issue worse than other people, broadly speaking. Like the ancient Greek philosophers talked about time as chronos and kairos. We've known for a long time the sequential passage of time is disconnected from our experience of it. That's not a new thing, and it's not unique to neurodivergent people.
Well, and a more mundane example for routine is that I'll have a client say, I wanted to go on a 30-minute walk at 7 p.m. and I got home exhausted from my 9 to 5 job at 5:30, and I started playing video games, and all of a sudden it was 9 p.m. and I didn't even notice when 7 p.m. passed, and of course I didn't go on. Like that kind of feeling of like time just like slipping through their fingers.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's some phrase connected to this. What is it? Oh, right. Time flies when you're having fun, which surely only neurodivergent people would say.
We're not allowed to have fun, Brandon. This is capitalism.
Which is why I was talking about the distraction comment earlier, because a lot of the time, all people are saying is this thing that I'm doing is enjoyable and therefore at least theoretically beneficial to me.
Well, I think
that client
would say,
they're saying to themselves.
They would say, yeah, Brandon, of course I like it, but I really need to exercise. Like this metric is blah, blah, blah.
Why? Why do you need to exercise?
They would say something about maybe their health, their body's health.
And then I would talk to them about that, and I'll skip, a lot of the in between and not make you role play. But get to the fact that a lot of the time when people are talking about health, what they're talking about is predicting future outcomes, which is impossible. This is part of how the research gets problematic for people, is you force yourself to do. Talking about health in that way is literally the medical model. It's saying that behaving in the normal or most average way is the most beneficial, regardless of any individual variables. But different people's bodies need different types of nutrients at different amounts and different rates and different types of sleep. So you have a system that tells you all this stuff that's unique to you, and then you have research which is average and therefore very helpful and useful when something is going wrong and you say, I want to change something, I want to experiment with something. Super useful to be able to say, well, most people do best with 8 hours of sleep. Let me try that.
And I can imagine that client saying, oh my gosh, Brandon, you're right. That's super cool. I feel so enlightened. I still want to go on walks every day.
Great. What do you mean by want? Because here's the thing. This is where it gets ironic, right? What I actually would talk about at some point with that client is, what is pain? Why do we, that is a perception, a sense, they call it nociception, N-O-C-I-ception, the ability to sense pain. What is it? Why do we have the ability to feel it? We don't have, like some creatures don't have nervous systems. So why would our organism be able to feel pain? And everyone will say, well, because whatever's hurting you is, it's a problem. It might kill you or cause you long-term damage if it is allowed to continue, which is true, right? It's your brain and body, the physical embodiment of you, which I would like to come back to. The brain is adaptable, the body is stable. That's an important part of the mind-body connection to me. But anyway, your brain and body, which change very slowly. By and large, your physical body, my physical body, is the same as the average person's physical body from 20,000 years ago. By and large, there are some differences, but so they have built-in responses to things. As in other words, pain is your body's best guess about, if you don't deal with this thing, it will cause us more damage, potentially even kill us the longer it goes unaddressed, because the body cannot perceive of a future, only the moment. So there has to be a thing in the moment that gets the body to respond to it. Now here's the question that nobody ever pairs with that. Then what is pleasure? Why do we have the capacity to feel it? What does it do? I'm actually asking this time.
Incentivizes us to repeat whatever we perceive, even though causation or correlation isn't causal.
Yeah, it's the exact same but opposite. It is your brain and body's best guess that the thing which you are doing or experiencing will be more beneficial to you the longer it goes on.
So then I keep wanting to get practical. I'm so sorry, but would a design intervention be then, what is the intersection between what we could call exercise and things that bring you pleasure?
Yes,
so you can be like,
that if someone is wanting to make a change to get more active, connecting it to a thing that they enjoy doing is much more likely to work. But before jumping to that, what I would want to say is, well, you want to be more active because you're hoping that it helps you to feel better. But the thing which you are currently doing that helps you to feel better, that you enjoy, is playing video games until 9 o'clock. And your response to that is that it is negative. Which means that you are breaking this system. You are responding to a feeling of joy as though it is a bad thing. So even if the workout, the exercise would theoretically make you feel better, it's not likely that you would notice it or respond to it as though it's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are not responding to things that make you feel better as though they are beneficial to you. You are looking at your own joy as a sign that what you're doing is actually bad.
I feel like there's some like feminist manifesto that could happen from that. I don't know.
Okay.
Like if we all could just lean into our joy unabashedly, that
In both cases, I think here's the rule.
Mm-hmm.
If something hurts you, causes you pain, you stop doing that thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though some things which cause us pain are beneficial for us, or at least we have reason to believe that they will be. If you're diabetic and you prick your finger to test your blood, that hurts, but you do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, working out hurts, but you
Yeah.
do it anyway because you think it's beneficial long term. But when something hurts you, your knee-jerk response is not to say, well, sometimes when something hurts, it's actually good for me, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Your initial response is to stop, unless you have specific reason to say, no, I should keep doing it because X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
Joy should be the same.
Yeah.
That it's not that you always do what you want to do, which is where people will sometimes go with what I'm saying. So I should just do whatever I want all the time. No. But your default response, your default assumption should be, this is beneficial for me in some way, unless I have a specific reason to be able to identify why it is not.
Mm-hmm.
And we already do that for the most part. So there's one thing that I won't allow, which is to say what else you could be doing with those resources instead that might be even more beneficial.
You won't allow that.
Because that is always true.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing you can do, no matter how beneficial, where you couldn't say there's something else I could be doing that would theoretically be more beneficial.
So do you think that keeps people kind of in loops?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
like
again,
unhelpful loops.
All these clients that are dealing with this stuff, they notice the bad stuff,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's physical, conscious, emotional, whatever. They notice the bad stuff and they deal with that as though it is a valid indicator of something about them. But then any of the good stuff, they dismiss. They might not notice it at all. Here's a very common pattern of this. If somebody compliments you and says that you're cool or attractive, you say, oh, no, and you forget about it, and it doesn't impact the way you feel or think about yourself at all.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody insults you and says you're mean or dumb
you remember
or ugly,
it forever.
it changes the way you think about yourself.
You have nightmares about it.
Neurodivergent people, by and large, are much more likely to treat negative information about themselves as valid
Mm-hmm.
and positive information about themselves as invalid.
So we've got a couple more
I was
comments.
18.
What's that?
We've got a couple more comments here. One from your dad that says, anchoring has allowed me to change perception and perceive painful activities as pleasurable activities. What's anchoring?
I don't know what he means by that, but tell us what anchoring is. And I'll tell you, there are two different types of joy. Greek philosophy terms here again, because I like those terms. Things which are enjoyable phenomenologically, which means in the moment, the experience of it. Eating something that tastes good to you is enjoyable in the moment.
Hedonic?
That's called hedonic, yeah, hedonic joy. The other is eudaimonic, which means it is enjoyable because it is meaningful. So there are things you do, like working out, for example, which the moment-to-moment experience is not in and of itself joyful.
Mm-hmm.
But because of what you have connected it to, it is enjoyable to the point that, like, when I'm sore, I like it. It feels good.
Yeah, I like
sore.
the example of when I was learning about those terms. If you're climbing up a mountain, it could be similar to like having a heart attack, but it can be one of the most meaningful moments of your life to get to the top.
Yes.
Even as your body is like, stop it.
Hedonic joy is about what we're talking about, the unconsidered response of joy.
Yeah.
Eudaimonic joy is the stuff that you decide and connect meaning. Not decide is maybe not the right term, but you have connected A to B, and because you like B, A then becomes enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, neurodivergent people rely on eudaimonic joy more than hedonic joy because we're distrustful often of our own hedonic joy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that tastes good. I shouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
Like, here's a really good one because it was the example that you used. Somebody explained to me why it's bad to play video games. Anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping in mind that you're not allowed to say that you could be doing something else with those resources, which might be more beneficial, because that's always true, and we don't always say it. Why are we saying it about video games and not anything else?
Yeah, and pretty much, I don't play video games, but I think pretty much all of my clients who say that are essentially saying the thing that you're not allowed to say.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for me to
I should
like
be
it,
working
but
out,
I could
but
be.
Couldn't you do something more beneficial
Yeah.
than working out?
Yeah.
And you know what else that tends to lead to, that way of thinking, is that people will start literally, you said something similar to this actually just earlier, but clients say this to me all the time. They refer to sleep as a waste of time. I don't want to waste my time sleeping.
I feel very outed by you, Brendan.
Because they're thinking, A, it's enjoyable to me, it's something I want to do, therefore it can't be good for me. B, I could be doing other things which are more beneficial. Note, though, that usually when people are talking about that, the benefit they're talking about is productivity, meaning things that result in value to other people, that other people would observe and say, yes, that's valuable.
Yeah.
Because other people don't know how tired you are unless you tell them. So nobody can care about that unless you give them reason to, but then you feel bad for making them worry about you and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I do want to come back to the initial point, and I actually have a
There's more
super
comments, too.
practical, useful thing that I want to give to people here, because the theory is how we get to the thing that matters.
Yeah.
But the reason that nobody can do any of this stuff is because nobody has an actual connection of A to B. It doesn't actually become eudaimonically joyful. It becomes theoretically beneficial, which makes it work, which is fine. We can do work, but you can only do so much of it, and you've got plenty of work you're already doing, probably about the maximum you can do. So trying to take away any of your rest or recovery and increase the amount of work you're doing does not work. This isn't, people will look at this like I'm just trying to be nice and say, oh, you can do what you want and you're not a bad person or whatever. And I, to some extent agree with that. But it's about utility. The way everyone's talking about it does not work. Has anybody gone from somebody who did not regularly work out to somebody who works out regularly by habit, permanently by habit, meaning without even thinking about it, your default option becomes to work out? Has anybody done that without doing the interim stuff I'm talking about, where you find joy in it? Just from theoretically it's beneficial? It doesn't work.
No.
So you can keep telling yourself it does, but it won't. Or you can own up to the idea that maybe you've been convinced that your own joy is not a trustworthy signal, and therefore you are missing out on half of the useful information from your life. You're aware of what things hurt you, but you're not aware of what things help you. So when you want something to be better, all you know to do is to try and eliminate or reduce the things which hurt you. You don't know the other side because you haven't paid attention to it. And to whatever extent you have, you were told that that was invalid data because it shouldn't be beneficial or enjoyable to you. You're wrong. It's nonsense. You have to sleep. So, body, mind. I'm going to go fast.
Okay.
Consciousness is incredibly adaptable. That is its advantage to us and the cost that we pay. In one moment, you can be ecstatic, and in the next moment, you can be so deep in despair that it feels like you'll never climb out of it, depending on what happens in between. The conscious experience can shift incredibly moment to moment. The body is very stable. The changes which happen to the body happen very slowly, especially as compared to what happens to consciousness.
Yeah.
There is an advantage to stability and a cost to it. There's an advantage to adaptability and a cost to it. So we get the best of both worlds. We have two systems paired together. Like plants are way more stable than you or I, which means they're much more durable as long as the context doesn't change beyond what it is that they're suited for. But as soon as the context changes, they're done. They can't change. So they last a lot longer, but they die when anything changes. And then the flip side would be that if you're changing all the time, which I think is a very valid metaphor for the experience of neurodivergent people, that you're constantly shifting. The focus on cognition is thinking and changing and feeling, and it takes so much energy that you can't last very long that way. You have to pair the two together because you have to. The vast majority of what we do is done without consideration or awareness. So it has to be some stability to it. So the metaphor I like to think of is it's like your body is this big, tall tower and your conscious mind is this long rope with a big weight on the end of it. And you can, the smarter or more you spend on your conscious experience, the more you think and whatever, the longer that rope is and the heavier that, the further you can get it out to different places and pull it back and shift it somewhere else. And it's really quick and adaptable. But you're standing on top of this tower. And if that tower is rickety as all hell, then when you try and throw something out there, you're going to collapse before you get very far.
Yeah.
So you're trying to find the optimal balance of putting in the work to create stability that enables the conscious exploration. You don't want to do too little of either.
Mm-hmm.
This ties in with a follow-up comment from the person who wants to exercise and eat better. That part of the barrier to this is setting up those systems. So I guess making the tower a little bit less rickety.
So,
and the full comment makes me think about the fact that we think about all the steps. So I know jogging makes me feel better, but finding a place to run, making the time, having the right clothes, doing laundry, taking a shower, a lot of the things associated with it take effort to set up. I want to eat more healthy food, but that requires time and cooking and dishes. And I think this is where I sometimes get stuck in a
Me
loop.
too. Yeah.
I'm going to try and go real fast, and this is recorded so people can come back to it because we don't have a lot of time.
Got 5 minutes.
Very valid point. One thing I would say is common to neurodivergent people specifically, especially, not uniquely, but especially common for or intense for neurodivergent people, is our predisposition to address every problem as though it can be solved by thinking about it.
Yeah.
How do I clean this room? Let me think about the best system for it. But no matter what, when you're coming up with a system, sooner or later, it requires physical action to actually move the stuff. But most of the stuff that we're thinking about is stuff that gets solved by thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Especially notice that a lot of neurodivergent people tend to do jobs which are oriented around thinking and talking and writing and, going to meetings and whatever, not building houses or whatever, design, arts, etc. So we tend to respond to things as though the best way to resolve them is to think about them. And there's value because the more time you spend thinking about a system, the more efficient you can design a system to be. The big downside here, and this is why I focus on the accomplishment equation, is because nobody talks about the fact that thinking has a cost. We've all been convinced that thinking doesn't cost anything, that no matter how tired you are, if you want it, you can just think more, which means thinking does not follow the physical laws of the universe. Exerting your body, sure, you get tired, but you can exert your mind forever. And as long as you want to, you can still do it. And so if you don't, it just means you don't want to.
Ooh.
Which is bullcrap. So we overinvest into the thinking because we don't think of it as having any cost. And then when the cost does make itself clear to us and we're exhausted and stressed out and self-loathing and whatever, well, then we shift. That's not about thinking. That's a personality thing or a trauma thing or something else. And we don't associate it with the fact that we just spent, it takes glucose to think, right? There are physical things that must happen in order to think.
Yeah.
It's costing you something. And like anything else, you lift weights, it damages the system. And if you keep going too much, you get injured. Just with this, we call those injuries things like burnout and depression and whatever. And you can recover from them just like physical injuries, but not if you're going to keep doing the stuff that injured you in the first place.
Yeah.
Anyway. So what a lot of us are trying to do in the workaround and setting up these systems is we're trying to solve it once. I want to come up with a system of working out or eating or whatever, a routine that means I will never again have to think about this. That's not going to work because there are way too many variables for you to take into consideration. The weather is out of your control and changes what you need to eat and drink. You cannot plan a routine that is going to be the exact whatever you need. You can get kind of close. But if you're going to resolve this, you have to learn to pay attention to your physical form, the things you feel. And in therapy, a lot of that would be about talking about pleasure and being able to stop responding to pleasure as though it is bad.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you will never be able to do anything here. Because even if the working out no longer becomes painful and difficult, then you'll just think you're not working out enough. And you'll try and do it more because it's the difficulty that you're paying attention to, not the experience.
Yeah.
So you have to start paying attention. Know going in that it's going to get worse before it gets better because you're paying attention to something that you weren't paying attention to before, which means as soon as you start paying attention to it, you're going to be very distressed. Like, oh God, I feel way more tired than I used to now that I started doing this. When I can't say this definitively, but generally, No, you're just more aware of how tired you are. You weren't paying attention before. Now you are. It doesn't make you more tired when you sleep more. It doesn't. People, for example, very common one. I'm not hungry until I start eating. Like, I don't like to eat breakfast. I don't like to eat lunch. I'm not hungry at all day. I never get hungry. But once I eat in the afternoon, then I'm hungry all the time. No, you just became aware of it. Starting most likely because it got bad enough because you had waited so long. And yes, eating a bunch of stuff late at night probably messes up your sleep and makes you feel sick and shaky in the morning, which means you don't want to eat breakfast, and then the cycle continues. Most likely, but everybody's different. So we have to approach it consciously, those of us who approach things consciously generally. So here finally is the practical thing. I've got 60 seconds. Energy. Time does not matter. Time does not matter. You cannot manage it. You can't conserve it. You can't spend it at a faster rate. You don't control time at all. You control, to some extent, your behavior, what you do during that time. But even if you're doing something during a particular span of time, that doesn't prevent you from doing something else. My heart is beating and my stomach's digest. You can do as much. The limitation is your body, your physical form, and energy. Those are the limits. We pay attention to time because it's easy, because we have clocks and I can say an hour and you and I both think the same thing. Energy, what am I supposed to pay attention to? How do I express to you how much energy I think something will take? So when I say how hard will it be, instead I'm going to say, 20 minutes, as though that's an expression of difficulty when it's not. Here's all I can say for sure about energy. It's more than one thing. I think anybody who's ever tried to really figure out what in the world energy is has kind of gone crazy in the pursuit, because I don't think you can really figure it out. But there's a lot of work been done by a lot of people for millennia. Chakras, right? Like the different humors, like all these different cultures throughout history have looked at, clearly there are different types of energy, because there are some things I do that make me feel more energized in one way, but more drained in another.
Yeah.
So you got to explore it for yourself. But here's where I start. I do 4 because to me, that's the right balance of how many without getting too specific. I call them global, which is purely about sleep. And that's a lot about recovery. We don't have time for all that. Global, which is about sleep. Cognitive, social, emotional, and physical. I scale them 0 to 10, 10 being the most I use 0 to 100, but you can use whatever. I scale them 0 to 100, 100 being the most energized I could be, 0 being completely depleted. And then at first, the easiest way to start is just whenever you think about it, at whatever interval it pops in your head, take a quick second and just check in. Don't make projections, just check in. How do I feel in terms of needing to sleep? How groggy and tired am I? I'm a 40. Remember that 100, the one you want, is the high number. 100's the best. 0's the worst. If I had to do, this is how I ask these questions. If I had to do a very emotionally draining or socially exertion thing right now, how much would I want to put that off to some other time? Is a question to ask to be able to gauge this for yourself. No, I'm ready to do that right now. It means you're probably pretty energized. Yeah. And no, I would give it anything to put that off. It means you're pretty depleted. And you just ask that about, if I had to do a very intellectually draining task, a socially or emotionally draining task, and a physically draining task. So that you start to get an awareness of how your body feels, your form feels in different ways at different times. Then automatically you will start to feel a lot worse about your body because you're paying attention. For me, it got real bad when I was starting to do this, to the point where I was I am always tired all the time. What's wrong with me? I must be sick. I must be dying. And it's not until later that I started to make some changes and recover a bit and be oh, right, I hadn't slept for more than 6 hours in 3 years. Yeah. Of course I just wasn't paying attention. And as soon as I started, I became very concerned. Yeah. Which is a lot of not what chronic fatigue syndrome is, but it is a lot of what brings people's attention to it, is people who have never paid attention to how tired they are finally hitting a point where they notice it, and then they can't stop noticing it. Yeah. Instead of thinking of it as maybe I've always been this tired and just not paid attention, and they think of it as I've never been this tired before. I'm doing the same things I've always done. Why am I so tired? But a lot of the time, the routine that people describe to you about what they do and why they're so distressed that they're tired, they describe their day. And it's yeah, of course, that's an exhausting day. but they were doing it without feeling tired for so long that they're like, yeah, I know, but I can do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's changed. So you will feel worse, and you got to be prepared for that. And just like with all habits, you have to get somebody else involved, because you will be very aware of the cost. You will not be aware of the value. It's theoretical.
Yeah.
So the interim value has to be another person, that they are happy that you're doing it. And that'll keep you going until you start to know. At this point, I mean, I'm a guy that I used to like, oh, I could never give up meat or this or that. You know, like I would eat one big meal a day and just eat like a giant meal until I hurt and whatever. And now tomorrow's my birthday, and I went to a dinner that my mother-in-law made for me last night, and I was like, I just want the salad and not so much the dessert you made for me. Like I had a little bit to not be rude.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, sugar at 7:00, I'm gonna feel, because I've started to notice this stuff.
Yeah.
Before it was a rule I gave to myself,
Yeah.
but now I notice when I eat this, I feel bad, and when I eat this, I feel good. So I don't give a crap about what it tastes like, and like I would trade anything
Yeah.
to feel energized instead of exhausted. I don't care about giving up cheese.
Mm-hmm.
So now all you eat is kale.
Not quite yet, but I'm on my way. I'm moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Because really, I love to think. I want to be able to swing that weight all around. I need my body
A
to
very
be
steady
stable.
tower.
Yeah. Otherwise, the further you go into thinking, the more distressing it gets.
Yeah.
To be able to feel like we address this all psychologically and whatever, which, you know, great, there's utility to that. But everyone's focused so much on the psychology, they forget the other part of it, which is that thinking it's like a holodeck. You're making the thing you think a reality in your experience. So when you think about problems, your whole experience is problems. And you need some grounding, anchoring, I think, is probably part of what you're talking about. Something to pull you. And that
Anchoring.
Can be and right.
We have clarity on what anchoring is. It's
I don't know that
self-hypnosis.
That's why. Okay.
Sorry.
Please.
Interrupting. Sorry.
No.
Mentally attaching pleasurable results to activities that we say we want to engage in, and adding or attaching painful results to not engaging in those activities.
That's great. Don't do the second, not because you never should or whatever, but because you all do it already. You wouldn't be considering the change if you didn't already connect negative experiences to the not doing it. You don't need extra. Put more effort in. If I ask you, you neurodivergent listener right now, if I say to you, what do you want? You probably can't answer that question. How many times do I literally say, do you want the door closed or open? And people say, oh, I'm fine with either. That wasn't my question. What do you want? I'm okay with it if you want to close the door. No. What do you want? Can you answer that question? And if you can't, it's because you don't pay attention to the things that are enjoyable. You only pay attention to the stuff that hurts. So you know what you don't want. But you have nothing to pursue, only things to avoid, which leads to a life of hypervigilance and stress no matter what is going on, because you never know when this stuff might come up. And even if it's not and you're in a safe environment, well, great, I can just think about how it might happen later. Or maybe it actually happened earlier and I missed it. Or maybe it's theoretically happening right now and I just don't understand it somehow. You have to think about what you want, which means you have to pay attention to what you enjoy and treat that as valid information.
Which means that none of us need diapers. I'm trying to do a comedian
wrap up.
I know, I got to get going too.
Yeah, we're over
that stuff. We can talk more about it, energy management. We can do more detail later, but start with that. Just check in. Where am I at here? Every morning when you wake up, where am I at? Automatically, you'll start thinking, well, what did I do yesterday? How did I sleep last night? And then, you get finicky.
You'll be your own scientist.
I want it to be 68 degrees in the house when I'm sleeping because that helps. And I don't eat sugar after 6 p.m. You start doing this stuff automatically because you notice what affects you. You don't have to do it cognitively. Anyway, went over, but thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Get a running buddy. Get someone to cook with you. Cook dinner for somebody. Make it fun, I guess.
Get other people involved.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent people especially will do almost anything to avoid disappointing other people.
This is true.
So get somebody else that's your running buddy, and then you'll go running.
Yeah.
Unless they're also neurodivergent, and then there will come a day where you both don't want to go, and neither of you contacts the other person, and you both, let's just leave
I
it.
feel like there could be some like dating app that's like neurotypical like coming together, where it's like one person is like, I unapologetically would like to go running every day, and if you don't come with me, I'm going to be so disappointed.
Call it
But the
nudge
other
or
person makes
something.
them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
It's great. We
Great
solved
to
all
be
the
with you
problems.
I feel
both.
like I did a lot of talking today when I was trying to present a thing. It's good to
No,
be
it's
with you
helpful.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's fun.
same. And thanks for being here in the chat and for watching along. And hopefully we'll see you again next Monday.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.